Welcome to the Ignite Podcast, where we introduce thought leaders and subject matter experts that you'll want to consider for your next corporate event. Now, here's your host, Dennis Warden.
Well, I want to welcome our listeners to the Ignite Podcast. And this week we have as our guest, Katey Dallosto, or Coach Katey. And, there's a lot of people, and I've often said as we've done these podcasts, one of the unique things that Matt and I have with Ignite is we're able to represent and work closely with friends. And not only good friends, but friends that have been together for a long time, have we've been able to observe them in action, and that makes it even better. So, Coach Katey, welcome to the Ignite Podcast.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I so appreciate being part of it. Thank you all for listening in today. This should be fun. At the very least, I try to bring fun to every opportunity.
Absolutely, and you do. You are fun, and we're going to learn more about that. But let me just share a little about you, Katey. Capisce Consulting is an Italian word for understand. Understanding is at the heart of great relationships, and really understanding those relationships is critical as you share, regarding sales, building great teams, etc. And you've been at this for about 25 years or better, and working with sales and leadership experience, a national trainer, a business coach, a sales consultant. You've trained well over 30,000 sales and leadership professionals. And I was fortunate to be a part of it, but you published a great book that is just full. The thing I love about this book is it's full of tidbits. It's just like, it's one of those books where you can just pick it up. I can pick it up to chapter 12, and life doesn't just happen to you. And I can get some good meat out of that one chapter and put it back down. So I've got if you can see back behind me, I have my thinking chair. That's where I love to just sit down and read, and get away from the desk, sit down and read. And so this is one of those books where, the first time going through it, you read through it, but I love it because it's one of those that you can sit down and then pick back up and just go to various chapters within the book and continue to learn, but almost kind of a rebirth of an understanding of leadership and relationships. So it's a great book, Katey.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And let's start out. I started out introducing you as Coach Katey. How in the world did you come to be known as Coach Katey?
Coach Katey is a good story. So it actually started with, I was coaching my son's Little League team. So I'm a baseball coach, and I'm a baseball fan, and I know how to keep score. I'm one of those weirdos that keeps score when they go to the baseball game. And my son is still will be a high school senior this year, and wants to play college baseball. And so I was his first baseball coach. And so I didn't know how to have the kids, what little 5, 6, 7-year-olds, what to have them call me. So we just started with Coach Katey. And then I was also running a real estate office at the time, and I was coaching real estate agents with their business. And one of the agents came in, and she's a top producing agent now, and she said, you really are Coach Katey, not just for baseball, but you're Coach Katey because you help people with their business and sometimes with their life, or sharing some wisdom, which is sort of what my book is about. And I said, so we're going to call you Coach Katey. And I ended up buying the domain name, and it stuck. So Coach Katey has become something that is just fun, and I like it. So it's coming in and giving a little burst of coaching, wisdom, perspective, and I do it with small and large businesses, friends. My sister will call me and says, "All right, I need Coach Katey for a minute," and it's been fun.
Oh, that's great. Let me ask you this. Because, you started out saying you were coaching, your son in Little League baseball. You're a coach that way. But so we often hear, is he or she is a born athlete. They're they're just, so let me, are salespeople born, or do they learn it?
You know, I think both can be true. I think you can have some born natural skills. I believe that salespeople really can learn a lot from 5-year-olds. I believe kindergartners are the best salespeople on the planet, because a 5-year-old knows how to ask the same question about 17 different ways.
Hmm.
They know how to handle objections. Well, what about this and what about that? And bring in different things. And I think we lose some of that as we get older. My own personal experience is that I went to Catholic school, so I learned to sell in the first grade. You know, we had the candy bar sales, the wheel-a-thons, you name it, and I loved it. I loved that environment. I loved a little bit of the competition to be the top salesperson. And then I had some corporate sales training at ADP and at Abbott Laboratories that was incredible, that kind of honed some of that natural ability. I have trained over 30,000 sales and leadership professionals on sales, that you can learn it. It's like any other skill. And it's sometimes we overthink what salesmanship is. And
Right.
great salespeople ask great questions and are great listeners. Hence the word capisce, right? Do you understand what's going on with this prospective client? Asking the right questions to see if you can help them. And sometimes you sit in a sales meeting and you asking questions, you're like, wow, my services or my offering is not a right fit, but you know what? I know somebody, let me connect you.
Right.
And those are those really positive experiences that come out of a sales meeting.
That's great. Part of being a good coach too is accountability. It's and it's not just accountability to to you, the coach. It's accountability to your teammates and to oneself. And I know that's a big word for you. I mean, you're big on accountability. Why is that so important?
I could be here for a long time talking about accountability, so I'll try to keep it succinct. A couple of things about accountability. Accountability to me means I love you, means I
Mm,
care about you. That if I'm your leader or I'm your teammate and you tell me that something is important to you, whether it's a personal goal, a professional goal, a team goal, hey, I want to achieve this, and you tell that to me as your manager, as your teammate, and then I never ask you about it, what's the point? I mean,
hmm.
most time when we think about accountability, a lot of times I hear managers or leaders say, hey, you know what? Everybody here is a grown up. I'm not here to check other people's homework. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just stay with that analogy. If you're in second grade and your role as a second grader, your job is to get to the third grade and learn what you need to learn in the second grade to get to the third grade, to progress. If you don't do your homework or you don't do it well, and the teacher checks your homework, not to be mean, but to make sure that you've learned it, that you're progressing towards your goal. And if when the second grade teacher checks your homework and you don't do it correctly, do they yell at you? They tell you you're a terrible person? Or does the second grade teacher say, oh, maybe you're not quite getting this concept. I'm going to help you, because your goal and my goal as your teacher, as your coach, as your manager, is to help you progress to where you want to be. And so it's around caring, it's around support, it's around, hey, maybe you're not understanding this, we need to come at this from a different angle. Again, it's around capisce. Are you understanding what needs to happen to get you to your next step, to your next level? Accountability to me means I love you and I care about you.
Oh, that's great. Our guest today on Ignite podcast is Katey Dallosto, and just an incredible coach, incredible speaker that just brings a lot of energy to this platform or the stage. And so it's great to have you on our call today. And you were talking about this whole matter of accountability. And I'm wondering now, how much is that done on one-on-one, and then how is that done in a sales meeting? And I know you've got like there's 5 critical things to make up a good sales meeting, but what's done one-on-one with a salesperson, and then what is better done in a group as a whole?
You know, I'm also a fan of Pat Lencioni's work and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and accountability is one of the major 5 things, and it's more around holding each other accountable. And sometimes that is best done in a group. If there's a sales meeting or a staff meeting, and one of the things that's great about sales is you always know where you are, right? You have a
Hmm.
quota. how are you doing on percentage of your quota? And sometimes in a sales meeting, everybody can see who is, on track and hitting their goals or exceeding their goals, and who is struggling. And sometimes in a group environment, it's great to say, hey, Joe is struggling a little bit. Hey, how can we help him? How can we support him? Joe, what's going on in your territory right now? What's the challenges you're running into? Oh, you know what? Bob over here or Sarah over there, they had that same challenge last year or 2 years ago. This is how they handled it. So again, if accountability means I love you, it means I want to help you get to where you're headed, get to your goals. And so in a group environment that can be really supportive and actually be that mastermind thing where you get several minds together that can solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really powerful to do that in a sales environment as a team. And again, it's that accountability with each other. The one-on-one piece is where the manager is sitting down and saying, okay, we talked about these challenges that you're having with your territory. Is there something that you need help with? You know where you are, you know where you need to be. Are you having trouble with that delta? And then my job as your manager, as your leader, is to help you with getting those resources and helping you to achieve your goal.
That's good. So you live up in the Bay Area, and you hop on a plane, and I think in the last year or so, you went down to some of our mutual friends at List Reports, and did a session for them. And I'm just curious, not just what value you bring, but I'm really curious. You get on the plane, you make that flight down, whether it's to Southern California or out here to Atlanta, Georgia, wherever, you make that flight to, but you leave home, you come and you deliver the goods, you get back on the plane, you fly back home. Not just what's the value you've brought, but what says to you, Katey, I brought the goods. What is your passion, and what do you want to leave an audience or an association company with?
I think my favorite thing is the light bulb moment, the moment where I am sharing an idea or a thought or a piece of wisdom, and the light bulb goes on, right? That somebody gets it and they're like, oh, I get this now. This makes sense to me now. This is something that had been out there in the universe, and now I was able to bring it down. I think one of my gifts is that I can take somewhat complicated and complex ideas and whittle it down to something very simple. My book is called Fortune Cookie Leadership because they're little one-liners, right? And they're one-liners that encapsulate somewhat complex ideas. And there are books this thick on the idea that is written in a one-liner in the book. And the book was originally written for salespeople, so the longest chapter is 2.5 pages long, because I understand salespeople and particularly sales leaders that sometimes you just need that quick, like, oh yeah, you know what, I forgot about that, or I just need to be reminded, or I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I think one of the things I get constantly when I do speaking to large and small groups is I get, wow, we love your energy. And that I have passion and energy around these concepts where people are willing to have that conversation, to go a little deeper, to understand, okay, this is why sales is so important to my organization. This is why I need to be really comfortable with accountability. This is why I need to ask better questions. This is an understanding of what this is going to do to impact not only my professional life, but my personal life as well.
That's good stuff. And so I'm curious. You're busy. You're not only busy as a mom, but you're busy as a businesswoman, and you do a fair amount of travel. I get to see some of the locations you go to. So you're busy, and then you do the speaking, and you do the coaching, and you do the consulting. But there's always a lot of tasks that need to be done. I mean, just for me, it's like the busy work, or it's the stuff that I just don't like to do. How do you push through? How do you persevere through kind of the boring tasks that are behind the scenes that have to be done? And what is your why for doing that?
Yeah, I think it's, every job has the parts of the job that aren't fun. I'm currently consulting a small firm here in the Bay Area and getting their database together. and helping them on how to have a really clean database. And some of it is just boring, right? Doing research and finding the right information and updating the information. And sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And that it's the end game of once we have a clean database and we know we can start to implement some consistent sales activities, we know that the goal is right there. It is kind of, we're both sports people, and Vince Lombardi started off with like, this is a football, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're supposed to be doing. The blocking and tackling may not be the most exciting part of the game, but if you don't have it, then you don't have touchdowns. You don't have great plays without good blocking and good tackling. So it's that staying focused on what your goals are. Is it your goals, whether they be financial goals, professional goals, that I've got to do some of these little things, because those little things, one on top of the other, that compound effect is what's going to help me get to where I get to do. Jocko Willnick is another mutual friend of ours. And Jocko says discipline equals freedom. And so it's the discipline of, okay, I'm going to do some of these follow-up tasks or email I have to do my email. I've got all these things to deal with, but I know that responsiveness to the people that are emailing me is important for not only my professional reputation, but also important as far as feeding my business and making sure that I'm staying on top of those things as they go forward.
What is so as we press through these, we have the goal, we talked about football, we've got the goal line, right? We know we get to the goal line, we've accomplished at least that part of the game, right? Then we do it again. But then we have yard lines along the way that tells us where we're at. What do you do, and what do you share with an audience with regard to having a clear goal, a clear focused direction that you're heading toward, and then having the road signs or those things along the line that keep you on track? I'm just curious on how you share that with an audience and your insights on that.
Absolutely. I really feel that any sort of goal, particularly a sales goal, is like a roadmap. That may be because when I was a kid, I was the navigator. I was always the kid that had the big old map on my lap and figuring out where we were going to go and where we were going to stop for lunch and where the rest stops were and things like that. That those men, we were that much closer. So if you're in San Francisco and you want to get to Chicago, it's okay, what are the time frames I'm looking at? Like, how fast do I want to get to Chicago from San Francisco? What is important to me about getting there in that time frame? And what are the markers along the way? I think sometimes in sales, we get these goals and we get so focused on the end game that we forget about measuring and celebrating those successes along the way. When I was managing real estate people, I would talk to them about, you got to have better days than just the day that you get a commission check, right? What other things are you going to be celebrating? I did a speaking event for Challenge Butter, their dairy sales. And we talked about that you've got this focus, but you've also got to count on, hey, I had a good day today because I talked to 5 customers and each of those customers increased their orders. So it's celebrating the little steps along the way, just like a roadmap, right? The same sort of process that you would do in planning a trip. If you were driving, you might plan your goals in the same way. And at what measuring points are you going to celebrate? I also believe that you need to have a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator just in case there's a champagne emergency, right? And you need to celebrate those things and find reasons to celebrate, particularly in a sales environment where we get told no a lot. And so you need to celebrate the little wins to push you through some of those opportunities to push through the no's.
You know what? I like the chilled bottle of champagne better than somebody ringing the bell. So we're visiting today with Katey Dallosto on the Ignite podcast, and you can learn more about Katey by going to igniteadvisorygroup.com, and you'll find everything you have there and even be able to click on more information and booking Katey to come speak for your organization. And because of everything we've gone through, it may be in person and it may be a video event, but we'll make it happen because she's got the goods and she'll deliver them. And so, Katey, it's great to have you on our podcast today. A question I'd like to ask. In fact, I was asked this question today, so this is good timing because it fits in just with who you are. So, one of our clients said, "Dennis, I'd like you to fly in, and I'd like to have you help us, develop a good business plan." Well, what is a good business plan, and what does a good business plan look like?
Business plans, I think the best business plans are often the most simple ones, where you can set a goal that's 12 to 18 months, and then you've got to break it down into measurable tasks in between, or measurable goals for hitting that overall goal. So you've got a business plan, and then typically 4 or 5 things that need to happen to reach that plan. I am a fan of the red, yellow, green model, that when you get your team together, this actually how Ford Motor Company was turned around in the early 2000s, was with this model of red, yellow, green. Come in and say, okay, we have 5 areas of focus to reach this business plan. How are we doing on each of these 5? Are we red, yellow, or green? Green means we're on track, everything's looking good. All right, perfect. Yellow is like, well, we've got this going, but we've got a couple areas that need some attention. And red is we've completely come off the rails. We need help. We're way off course with this area of focus. And so when you have those strategic areas of focus to review, it makes it very easy to market if it's red, yellow, or green.
Mm-hmm.
And then the group, that mastermind, we talked about accountability, that mastermind gets together. First, we're going to talk about the red items, right? And say, okay, what's going on with these? How do we get them fixed? We get the group together to come together with some solutions. Then we talk about the yellows. There's no real need to talk about the greens because they're on track, right? And so I think when you develop a business plan, it's got to be very measurable, but then it has to have those strategic pieces in line of what are the things that need to happen to reach that goal. And I think business plans that get complex and have too many pages, it's hard for the team to rally around what that plan is, and it's hard to articulate it. And make it very, very simple. I said, I'm reading a book around the turnaround of Ford, and it just reminded me about even a giant company like Ford Motor Company had a very simple goal, and everybody knew their piece and what they needed to do to achieve it.
That's great. And you set me perfect up for the next question I was going to ask, because at the beginning we talked about my reading chair, my thinking chair, and fortune cookie leadership, and reading your great book on leadership and sales. But so that you're reading this book regarding Ford Motor Company. But the question I was going to ask is, what is Coach Katey reading that's helping you grow personally and professionally?
So because I speak a little bit of Italian, I often like to read books about Italy, right? And getting back to the, but I like to read stories that are going to help sharpen the saw. I am reading The American Icon right now about Alan Mullally. I got to meet him at an event a couple months ago, and hearing the story where Ford Motor Company was on the brink of disaster, and how he turned it around with very simple concepts that, even as something as big and as complicated as Ford, and all the pieces in the international, process of what they had to go through, and just getting it down and whittling it down to something super simple that everybody could understand and everybody could support, from the executive leadership team all the way down to the guy on the assembly line. So I love those kinds of books. I read Andy Andrews' books. I like him a lot. I tend to read books about stories of success and motivation. I have my stack of books that I need to get through and commit my time to reading it. But the book around Ford, I thought was going to be almost like a business book and a little like dry, like reading like a textbook. I was curious about it, and it reads like a novel. It's so interesting with all the characters and who's going to do what, and how are they going to make this happen, and so it's fun to read books that surprise you a little bit, and also I'm learning a ton reading it, so it's great.
That's good. Hey, we've already mentioned that our listeners can go to igniteadvisorygroup.com and learn everything about you. But Do you have a website, a Facebook page, an Instagram page, somewhere where we can send people to, where they can just learn more about you or get on, a newsletter or anything like that?
Yes. So Coach Katey is Facebook and Instagram. And then my website is Capisce Consulting. Or you can also Coach Katey, and I spell Katey, Katey. So my mother was Irish, my dad's Italian. So I'm half Irish, half Italian, which means I like a loud fight. So definitely bring energy to any room.
Great, great. Hey, before we wrap up, what's the biggest challenge that you see right now that's facing, whether it's an entrepreneur or just salespeople? What's the biggest challenge hanging out there right now?
I think one of the things I see is sometimes a lack of leadership training. And I believe that leadership is not just a title. So you may be an independent contributor, a salesperson on a team, and you might not have a leadership title, but you are a leader either amongst your team or sometimes even with your clients. And I think leadership fatigue is the thing I see the most of leaders that are giving, and don't know how to recharge their batteries. Looking for, how do I fill my bucket so that I can give? Because it's exhausting, and it's well-meaning and in a good place of, I want to give and give and give. And then the next day I got to give and give and give some more. And I think that leadership fatigue is often a challenge for most leaders that I see right now, that I'm hearing about the most, is how do I get that piece for myself? How do I fill up myself so that I can give? And is that watching content? Is that listening to a great podcast like this? Is it reading books? What is it that I can do as a leader to fulfill myself so that I can give? And I think that that's something that I'm hearing a lot right now.
So on the leadership side, fatigue. Prior to our recording this podcast, we were talking about salespeople and maybe the lack of training or the lack of just professionalism. So I see that is that also a big challenge out there?
Yeah, I think that it's a huge challenge, is the sales piece. Now, I'm very biased. I'm a salesperson at heart, and I also cut my teeth at ADP. That's a very sales-focused organization, and I got a lot of training and learned a ton from them. That a lot of organizations don't understand or don't know how to develop a sales culture inside of their organization, with the understanding that if you make the best pizzas in your town, but nobody ever comes and buys pizzas from your pizzeria, your pizzeria shuts down, right? So that you have to have sales in order for your business to be success. Regardless if you're an accountant, a pizzeria, or a Fortune 500 company, sales is what will drive your business. And so there's sometimes a lack of sales culture. Some people have this perception of what it means to be salesy and be a salesperson. And I believe great salespeople are like great matchmakers. They ask great questions. They help find what's the need, what's the solution, how can I help you? And those are what great salespeople do. And great training helps you with that, on how to create that environment. I think you had asked me, and I don't think I answered your question about the 5 steps of a sales presentation. And they're very simple steps. Can I take a minute to go over them?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So this is 5 steps of a sales presentation. The first step is building rapport. People buy from people they know and trust. So if they're getting to know you, you want to be real. You want to be a person, and they're a person, and tell me what's going on, or where are you from, or tell me a little bit about your interests. And usually when you're sitting in a face-to-face meeting, or even now on Zoom, I can see what's behind you and some things that might interest you, or I might ask you questions about things on your wall. And we can connect as 2 people. The second step is the needs analysis. So the needs analysis is really, what's going on? Hey, Dennis, thanks for making time for me today. What's going on with your business right now that you have some questions? Or like, I'm going to ask you some questions about what's happening in your business. And you get into those needs. What are the pain points? What are the struggles? What's keeping them up at night? My favorite question is what I call the magic wand question. if you had a magic wand and could change 3 things about your business, what would they be? And the hardest part on that one is shutting up and doing the listening part and really listening to what their magic wand needs for their business.
Mm-hmm.
You spend the majority of your time on building rapport and the needs analysis so that the third step of presenting a solution is quick and easy. Well, hey, I think I can help you with 2 of your 3 magic wand requests. Let me see if I can grant your wishes. And then you present your solution, whether it's a service or a product that you have, you can present your solution then, and then you handle objections. One thing I hear a lot is like, oh, I hate when they throw up the objections. I'm like, I love it, because objections to me say they're engaged, they have questions, and they're like inches away from being able to say yes to your product or service. Because an objection just says, I need to understand something before I can commit. And so those are great questions. If nobody has any questions after you've presented a solution, they may not be that engaged. So objections say that they're engaged in the process. And then the 5th step of a great sales meeting is the closing. So whether it's closing to, okay, sign here so that we can get the process started, or closing for the next step. All right, well, our next step in the process is for us to meet with our engineers so that we can see about how we can help with your particular situation. So, and when you go through that process, it makes it very simple, makes it easy, and the person that you're talking to, the prospective client, feels like you're guiding them through a process versus just being all over the place. And they feel that you really are listening to their needs and presenting a great solution. But I think that that's something that if nobody has had that training and they don't know how to do that, they just kind of will end up going in and sort of word vomiting on people. Like, let me tell you, everything's amazing about our product or service. And your product or service, I'm sure, is amazing and fantastic. But if you start with a word vomit, it's very difficult for people to make a good decision at that point.
That's great. I was thinking as you shared that, and we may have both heard this at the same place, but you know, a prescription without a diagnosis is malpractice. You know,
Right.
it's like we don't walk into the doctor's office and just, you know, say, you know.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
I totally, I'm raising my hand for those of you listening, that I have totally done the like word vomit on people. Let me tell you all these great things. And I have high energy, and one-on-one, my energy and word vomit at the same time will knock somebody off their chair. So I had to relearn a process around, oh, that's right, I need to ask the questions first, really listening, see if there's a situation where our product or service can help them.
well, and the 3 that really stood out to me. First off is just that relationship building at the beginning, the needs analysis. And then what you said about closing is that it's a closing to either a next step, or it's a closing to quote unquote close the sale. But it's always the beginning of the next step. It's not something that we, you know, rejection, which is too many times in my past, especially growing up as into sales and that, I always took it as rejection. And instead of, you know, I just haven't given enough information, but maybe I just haven't done enough diagnosing, and I'm giving a prescription, you know,
Right.
so already, hey, I've got the answer. You have spoken to hundreds of different companies and organizations, and you bring a lot of, like I said, a lot of energy to the platform. And some of the topics that you cover are in what area, Katey?
You know, I do everything from basic sales training. I do clarity with clients, which is a process around how to really understand clients. I'm certified in the DISC behavioral analysis, so I do some training around that, around how to understand different behavioral profiles and understanding your own. I do half-day trainings for leadership teams. I've done full-day offsites like leadership retreats. And I use some of the models from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, as well as incorporating things from fortune cookie leadership. So I do lead generation training. Some of the fun ones I've done is in person, where I come in and I actually run your team through a lead generation process. That one is called How to Make the Phone Ring. And so it's a thing that we do, and it's real play and role play. So they get to do some things live right there, and take some action. Those are fun too.
Well, Katey, thank you for being our guest today on the Ignite podcast. And I would just encourage our listeners to go to igniteadvisorygroup.com to learn more about you and to book you as a speaker, as a trainer, as a coach. But to get Coach Katey in their life is something that needs to happen.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you so much for everybody listening today, and look forward to chatting with as many people that I can help.
Great. Have a great day, Katey.
All right, you too.